Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 76 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin. That's Kevin.
So, Colin, I think it's obvious how genocide would be a gameplay modifier for Hearts of Iron and Victoria. We can see it for, say, Crusader Kings, and of course, everyone knows about Stellaris. How would you represent genocide in the Falcom Kaseki series?
Um, w- well, you would probably have to have a bracer mission, right? With target population, probably of a monster type or something like that. And in gameplay wise, this would probably be a way for them to institutionalize repeatable side quests. Because you'd have to go and like win 10 battles against this monster type or something. And then as you do more and more of them, you could have a hidden rating in your characters of like a cruelty rating. And you do enough of them, and then Ouroboros wants to recruit you because of the inner darkness that you've developed on account of murdering everybody. What do you think?
You know, I think there's a lot of ways that could be gone at it. Thankfully, the game series has no preference for doing that. And the reason is today the sidebar is on the Paradox Ground strategy games that both Colin and I have somewhat unusually played. It's a bit odd for us to have this much overlap in something that's not an RPG. And they're very contemporary, very resonant with politics and the like, especially Victoria and Hearts of Iron in ways that Kiseki, that JRPGs as a whole, are not. So there's a lot of contemporary political debates on the forums, a lot of contemporary issues with the modifications. And we're looking forward to talking about a really great example, I think, of how games interact with are reflective of mirrors to engage with, mirrors to reflect the world that we live in. I think it should be a really interesting episode today.
Sure. I think also for this podcast in particular, I mean, there are a couple of reasons why we decided to do it. The first is we needed to record an episode, and this is one that we've had on the back burner for a while. I've been a little bit busy, so I've been actually, and not for good things. I've been playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, so I haven't really gotten the chance to actually play Azure that much. I don't think Kevin has either because he's been traveling, so we don't have a chapter episode ready yet. But if we don't upload something now, we won't upload something for another 2 weeks because I won't be able to record next week. So we're doing it that, but on the more like substantive, important, and good side, that is the stuff I should be talking about, is that the Paradox games have a completely different type of storytelling. And we're big fans of storytelling on this podcast. But instead of them giving you a narrative that you play through like we do in JRPGs, you end up making your own story by means of playing the game. We call this emergent storytelling. So we want to talk a little bit about that. Before we do, I want to make an announcement about the podcast. And then Kevin and I want us to talk about some fundamental stuff. So the announcement is that this episode is released on a Friday. It is not released on a Sunday. And Friday is the day that we will be uploading episodes from here on out because Thursdays and Fridays are typically days that we cannot record. So if we don't record early in the week, we end up recording on Saturday and then having to edit it that same day, which causes a lot of crimps and cramps. And also means for me, it means less time doing research on the weekend because I have to be doing stuff on the podcast. And it's a bit this by moving it to Friday, we have more flexibility, we have more comfort in doing it. So we're moving the date.
Now, what better way for you all to start your weekend than with Trails in the Pod? I, for one, cannot think of anything more pleasant than to wake up to on a Friday.
I can think of a lot of more pleasant things, but I'm glad that you consider us to be that top echelon. So, Kevin, why don't you walk us through? We've been talking about paradox games. We know what that means, but most of our audience probably doesn't. So, what are they?
Okay, what if you have a game? You see two guards, one guarding a door to the left, the other to the right. The guard on the left says, I only speak lies. On the right, I only speak the truth. Which guard, what would you
Kevin,
ask each guard to get to the door you want?
Kevin, shut the fuck up and just tell us what these games are.
Oh, the other kind of paradox. So, Paradox games are games released by Paradox Interactive, a Swedish game company, and they're known for making grand strategy games. Games that take place over long durations of times, for the most part, decades, sometimes even centuries, where you control a family, a nation, a stellar nation, and the crude way of talking about these games is their map painting game. You just get more, you paint the world, the map, the galaxy, whatever, the color of your faction, of your family, of your nation. It's, I don't know how to adequately describe grand strategy games beyond its wonderfully complex simulations of military politics, sometimes the economy, sometimes even family dynamics in the case of one, and I don't know how to unite Crusader Kings to Stellaris to Hearts of Iron to Europa Universalis.
I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head on a lot of them, which is that you are usually controlling something larger than yourself. Crusader Kings is a bit different than that, but there's a lot of variables that you have to be juggling at any one time. You have to be juggling military strength, economic power, diplomacy. But also, what these games tend to do is that you set your own goals. The game might suggest things for you to do, but it's not like Civilization, which is another kind of 4X strategy game, in which there's a very definite like way to win that game, right? In Civ, there's multiple ways of achieving victory, but victory is something that can be achieved. Whereas with a Paradox game, you set your own goals as the player. You might decide to do something like in EU4, you might decide to revive the Roman Empire, or you might decide to colonize America as Ireland. But other than like conquering the entire world, there's not much there that you can describe as a victory condition.
So you mentioned Civilization and other 4X games. What exactly is a 4X game?
So a 4X game, it's another way of referring to um, these kinds of grand strategy games that we've been talking about. But the X part comes from a kind of, I guess, play on words that you can do. There are four elements of a 4X game that you explore. I'm quoting this from Wikipedia here. Explore means players send scouts across a map to reveal surrounding territories. Expand means that players claim new territory by creating new settlements, or sometimes by extending the influence of existing settlements. Exploit means players gather and use resources in areas they control and improve the efficiency of that usage. And exterminate means attacking and eliminating rival players. Since in some games, all territory is eventually claimed, eliminating a rival's presence may be the only way to achieve further expansion. So that is, I quoted that from Wikipedia, who is getting it from, looks like Moby Games. Not sure how standardized this definition is, but certainly having the four X's being explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. You can also put experience in there. It's a way to like sum up all of the constituent elements that make up these kind of grand strategy games.
Historically themed grand strategy war games where conflict is often one of the key, if not the central defining mechanism of the game. So let's have a history lesson. And I would be surprised if a lot of our listeners knew it, and even if you knew it, Colin.
Okay.
You've heard of Europa Universalis, the first big hit of the studio, correct?
Yes.
And you know it started as a board game.
I did not know it started as a board game, actually. That is news to me.
Yeah, I was floored when I heard it. But on retrospect, it makes sense. Strategy board games, Axis and Allies, Diplomacy, Twilight Imperium. Now that would be a great video game. Takes 12 hours to play. They're so coterminous with the board games that we know. That it's ones that I know that I play with the people that I know. And to see that make the jump from board game to computer game to massive franchise, I read that I was very surprised. I thought that's really cool. I thought it was cool. The scale of production going from one to the other to one of the most recognized brands in computer gaming.
You know, it's so recognizable, at least the genre is at this point, that today, this is not a joke. I was talking in class about Augustus, and we were talking about like building projects, and I even ended up saying that Augustus built tall. He didn't build wide, as you might do in certain Paradox games. And the students got it. Not all of them, but some of them definitely did. Uh, but I think that what might be useful for our listeners now is to talk about what Paradox games we're talking about, and then also what games do we actually play? Because we share some, but I think you play a little bit more than I do. And there's one omission that neither of us play that's really surprising.
Yeah. So first we have Europa Universalis. That covers late medieval through the early modern period, say late 1300s, early 1400s through the early 1800s, in which you take control of a spirit of a nation to lead it through this very tumultuous time in history, to expand, colonize, maybe engage with different religious reformations, maybe stop colonization in any nation in Europe, in Africa, North America, South America, Asia, Australia, not Antarctica.
Correct, not Antarctica, but it has basically every other continent in the world.
I think it's fairly simplistic compared to other games, and it's a map painting game in which you want to conquer. Warfare is a really big component of it, and I don't know. I mean, you could have a game in which you peacefully trade, play a republic or something like that. Would it be very fun? I don't think so.
No, I think that the only other major way to gain, like some people have done things where they gain territory through diplomacy, which can be done, very painstaking. So you don't necessarily have to do conquest wars, but the game really is a early modern grand strategy war simulator with economics and infrastructure tacked on as part of the overall war effort. It's also the game that I have the most time in out of Paradox games.
Next, in a chronological, when the first one was released, we have Hearts of Iron. That's a World War II game. It's a World War II grand strategy, the operational, I mean, multiple armies in which you fight World War II on either side, on the Allies, on the Axis, the USSR, Japan, China, Communist China, whatever. Though I confess in these games, I can only play the Allies because I don't want to be mean.
You play a lot of Hearts of Iron 4. That's a game that I don't play, but you do.
Yeah, I play here and there, have a couple thousand hours into it.
So look, there's two games that I play. One is Europa Universalis 4, and I'm going to see if Steam will tell me how much I've played of it. Um, okay, guess how many hours I have in Europa Universalis 4?
1500.
No, less than that.
Fuck off. Now I feel bad.
I have 378 and a half hours.
But you've played it so often.
Actually, I've stopped playing in the past few years. Now I'm thinking I might play it again. But during early grad school, dude, like it was like work and then come home and play EU4 for like a year.
I remember that we could not play do the reading group on Wednesdays.
That was because I was playing Divinity, and my
Uh
our advisor did not need to know about that. Evan.
Yeah, I have 1,415 hours in Hearts of Iron 4.
Jesus, no
In
game that
Crusader
fun.
Kings 2, I have 1,328.
You say Crusader. Well, we haven't talked about CK yet. How about Europa Universalis? EU4.
I don't have very many hours in that at all. 30.
Oh, only 30? Wow, that surprises me.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about EU4 a bit, just giving a brief overview of what that is. We've talked about Hearts of Iron, which apparently has captured Kevin's heart. Um, and tell us a little bit what Crusader Kings is.
Crusader Kings is simple. You take control of a dynasty in the Mediterranean world and
In the medieval
make
period.
its fortune in the medieval period and then make its fortune.
The thing that kind of distinguishes the Crusader King series from, say, EU4 or Hearts of Iron or Victoria, other than timeline, is that you are controlling a character uh, as a instantiation of a family, but you are controlling a character that, maybe has gaining titles here and there, but then maybe you lose this title and you get up in another title and then you die and you take control of another character who might have a completely different plot in life than you do. It's my first Paradox title was Crusader Kings 2, and I have 196 and a half hours in it. How many hours do you have, Kevin?
1,328.
I don't understand how you, because this is not the first time this has happened where like you played Fire Emblem Three Houses for hundreds of hours. I can do one playthrough and then I'm done. Like maybe play other games every so often. I'm just suggesting.
I do play other games. I have a couple hundred hours in Baldur's Gate 3.
Kevin, that's one other game that was released like months ago. Not that many months ago.
No, not that many months ago at all. So, I mean, I want to get my money's worth out of a game.
I mean, that's fair. And we should talk about the DLC projects that Paradox does now that I'm thinking about it, but we can do that near the end. Tell us about Victoria.
So the Victoria series is an economic simulator um set in from 1836 through the early 20th century, the heyday of colonialism, the second industrial revolution, European imperialism, the birth of nations, the birth of all sorts of isms, communism, socialism, the efflorescence of nationalism, and what say you control a nation in the long 19th century, and it's very much geared towards economics, not just, buy, sell, profit, get gold or get money, whatever, but okay, make a factory to produce machine parts, stockpile them, and when there's a depression on the market, sell them for high profit, or build a furniture factory. Make sure you have enough capitalists to be able to industrialize a growing economic society. You have enough bourgeois to buy consumer goods, but oh, by the way, they want political reform and economic reform. You have to balance that. It is a citizen management game.
So I only have 5.5 hours into Victoria 2. I've never played Victoria 3. But something that was quite interesting to me is precisely what you're talking about is that I mean, yes, there's the map painting aspect to it, there's the war, but a lot of it is citizen management. It's like domestic politics. And people exist on an individual level. It's not like okay, you have the population of New York, and all of New York is the same. It's like in New York, you have a certain amount of people that are scholars, a certain amount of technocrats, a certain amount of workers, and all of them make up the political landscape of that region that you have to learn how to balance.
Indeed, I think it's a wonderfully complex and amusing game. And I just want to give a brief anecdote about when Victoria 3 got released. There were a bunch of people online, on the forums, on Reddit, what say you, saying, wait a minute. Unfiltered immigration policies and laissez-faire industrialization, that's like a cheat code. And if you just turn on those policies, you'll win the game. Why isn't, and then they begin complaining about how come my niche weird political ideology doesn't have these, gameplay benefits. It's a really fascinating link to contemporary political discourse, to the 19th century discourse of how do nations succeed. And very much it was the ones that welcomed immigrants that did not have state control of the economy. And I think those two issues may be relevant in today's climate.
Well, a question for you, because I know that you do a lot of wider reading in modern history, more than I do for sure. Um, do you think that that is an accurate model of what happened during that time? Or do you think that Paradox is trying to put their contemporary political opinions into the mechanics of the game?
Well, I don't think anyone ever accused many Swedes of being firm believers in neoliberalism.
No, probably not. Nor are they the best on the immigration front.
The country that is, home to the single longest continuous unbroken government by social democrats, I believe, on earth, from the 40s through the 70s, decades of one party rule in that regard. They do a lot of research for the games, for Victoria, Europa Universalis, Hearts of Iron. And I really do think they captured why did nations like the United States, Argentina even to an extent, quote, succeed, end
Mm.
quote, in the 19th century. What intangibles, what tangibles?
Okay, that's good to know. I really should give Vicky 3 a shot. I've heard that it's very good. Just as I've heard Hearts of Iron 4 is very good, but I haven't tried that one either. We have two other series to talk about. You've mentioned Stellaris a bit. I haven't played much of Stellaris. So tell us a bit about your experience with Stellaris.
I find Stellaris a really interesting game that is fatally flawed in execution of an interesting premise.
Okay.
It's a space expansion game, and space expansion games have a really long history in grand strategy. Masters of Orion is a really famous, influential early one from the 90s. I just find Stellaris, I find it boring and shallow and way too many DLC. It's maybe maybe my computer was too slow to run, but games take forever. There's not much to do.
Yeah, I will say I did not find Stellaris to be that compelling when I've tried it. And I think a big part of it for me, it's the same problem that I had when I tried to play Civilization Beyond Earth. Because I play Civilization to like play civilizations that I identify with or that I know a lot about. So like I'll play Rome, I'll play Greece, Germany, England at times, America, the Irish if there's an option for Celts, that's not always the case. Once you get to like Beyond Earth and they're making things up, I lose a lot of what I can identify with. And I think Stellaris loses that angle as well. Not that you necessarily need that for a strategy game. I mean, Star Wars certainly doesn't have that, but um, it is an element that the Paradox games kind of capitalize upon to get you interested into the premises of their games.
I disagree about Star Wars. It has a lot you're familiar with. The Empire, the Rebels, the Mon Calamari, the Chiss, the Yuzin Vong. There's an apparatus there. People want to play what they're familiar with. You
Yeah, I mean,
know,
I
you
suppose that's
have this
true.
connection to Rome.
And
You
its
have a
connection to
connection to
Rome.
Rome. Interest. Yeah, you have a connection to Rome. You want to play Rome in a game, or the Seleucids, or Britain, or revolutionary France, or the US, or the Soviet Union, or whatever. There's a It's not you're not going in blind to a generic, oh, it's a United Earth. Okay, it's an alien race I've never heard of. I don't have any connection to draw me to them.
Well, speaking of connections and speaking of Rome, we've left one game for last that I don't think either of us play, that we probably should play, and that is Imperator Rome.
I played it.
So, how much of it did you play?
It's amazing I was able to sneak in and getting a PhD through my job of playing games.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm the only one who hasn't played it. But we both have PhDs studying ancient Rome. And I was in graduate school when this came out. I've played like for 4 hours. I was not that drawn in by it because it was very early in development when I played it, and it hasn't really been supported since. But how long have you spent playing it?
Not that long at all. 7.5 hours. The game was released. I don't want to say in an incomplete state, but it was not a polished
No.
state. There was not much there. It was not fun to really play as anyone but a couple of factions. Okay, let's zoom out. Imperator is a ancient Mediterranean game set in the rise of the Roman Republic. So you can play Rome, Carthage, the successor states to Alexander's empire. You could play Athens, or whatever. Now, the goal was to have a mix between, say, Europa Universalis, Crusader Kings, set it in the ancient world. It didn't do any of the inspirations well. There was not much depth to the game. It did not run particularly well. In short, there's not much there. What you did get to see wasn't that much fun, and you quickly exhausted the possible interesting factions very early on. So it's not a surprise the game had development cut relatively short after the game was released. I think maybe one or two major DLC, if that.
Well, according to Wikipedia, there are four, although two of them are just content packs. It has stuff for the Punic Wars. There's Magna Graecia, which introduces some gameplay mechanics for the Greek city-states. That's interesting, and it also overhauls religious mechanics. Then there's a content pack for Epirus that talks like it has stuff there for like Pyrrhus's rule, where we get the words Pyrrhic victory from. And then it has a big one in 2021, Heirs of Alexander, that's like fleshing out the Hellenistic world, which is really important for, being in a world in which Rome as a republic is rising. And I've not played Heirs of Alexander, but seeing what it's doing, that should have been there from the beginning. You can't have like the whole point of Paradox games is that you're not just playing the big things. You can play everything. And if you're going to set a grand strategy game on Rome, and then the other important kingdoms in the East don't have anything unique to them and are not fleshed out, that is not a successful Rome simulator at all.
No, it's not. And this ties in to something that we've talked about, but is really relevant for the paradox model. DLC, these games have, I don't think it's any exaggeration at all if I say the word dozens of DLC
Yes.
that on full price can sell for 10, 15, even $20.
Yes, I mean at this point now they've introduced strategies to help manage it, but for a while, if you wanted to like play all of the stuff released for Crusader Kings 2, which we haven't even talked about Crusader Kings 3, but I haven't played it that much myself. I tried to play a few nights ago and it crashed on my Steam Deck, so I refunded it. Um, but if you want to get all the DLCs for CK2, or if you want to get all the DLCs for Europa Universalis 4, which means unlocking all of the content that Paradox has put in there, some of which include some really core game mechanics, it can cost you like $300. These days, they've introduced a subscription model where you can pay a low monthly fee and have access to all of them, which does fix that problem a bit. But I feel like two ways about the policy because on the one hand, let's say you buy the base game, The base game is fun, and then every couple of months, you're playing the game, a new expansion pack is released, and it introduces new content. It keeps the game fresh. Another $15, yeah, that's not a big deal. I mean, that's what I was doing for EU4 for the longest time. But in that way, it just continues to extend the value of the game at a pretty reasonable pace and at a pretty reasonable price. The problem is that there's like 15 of them. And then I might turn to a friend of mine and I say, hey, we should play EU4 together. Just go ahead and buy this game. And you're probably going to want to get the DLC. They're not going to buy it. It costs $250.
You call in this, you want me to spend $300 on a game? Don't ever talk to me about games again. That's how I imagine most of these conversations would go.
I feel bad. I did make one friend do it, and he agreed. He bought the game. We played for 5 minutes, and he never played it again. I don't think that he bought over DLC because if you play multiplayer with somebody with the DLC, you can use the DLC during that game.
Interesting.
What's your take on the DLC situation?
It's complex. On the one hand, I don't want the Ubisoft model of yearly or semi-annual releases so the company can keep the lights on of pushing out roughly the same game without much innovation, without it being just something beyond just stale, warmed over leftovers. One. Two, the DLC. I understand how a lot of these mechanics cannot be in the base game at release, given how different EU4 is from 2014 to now. When EU5 has just been announced, it is night and day, completely different from one to the other. I think the subscription model works best to keep it in line of I don't want to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for the complete gaming experience. But on the other hand, I do not like this turn to subscription models for media consumption, for streaming. Everything's a subscription for so much. It just feels like you're being nickel and dimed.
Yeah, and especially it does open up, and this happens to me all the time. I'll sign up for something and maybe use it the first month that I get it, and then I just keep paying and not using it. Like I have a Crunchyroll subscription. I haven't watched Crunchyroll since like before my grandma died, and that was a few months ago at this point.
You can cancel it.
Yeah, I probably should, but then I'm like, but what if I want to watch anime? And then like, is it really worth it to? I signed up for HBO Max so that I could watch HBO's Rome to prepare for my job interview. Which actually did pay off. Not that I got the job, but I did use it during the job interview. That's the only reason why I signed up for HBO Max. And I went to go cancel it just last night. But then I realized, what's a show that I haven't watched is Curb Your Enthusiasm. And that's on HBO. So let me just go ahead and watch that. And now I have a reason to keep the subscription. At least there I'm getting some value. But like part of these services that it's always like, yeah, do I actually want to cancel it? Maybe I actually want to use it.
I don't know how to say this, but I have never had that problem.
So I do think that the DLC allows Paradox to like breathe some new life into the games. But we've talked a lot about what these games are, and to some extent, I think that the appeal to them for us as historians and lovers of politics is kind of obvious. Um, Even though, like, I do think it's ironic that neither of us played Imperator that much, and we're both Roman historians. But what attracts you to these games? I mean, you have thousands of hours, literally thousands. I don't even crack 1,000, but you have thousands of hours in these games. What keeps you coming back?
So the one I have the most in Hearts of Iron 4, I think, is going to surprise you why, Colin. It's because of the rich narrative and storytelling in the game. To
In
be
HOI 4?
specific, yes, in the mods for the game, the detailed, contained expansive narrative railroaded to an extent within the games that is not emergent storytelling at all. That's what keeps me going to Hearts of Iron 4. Not even the base game. I have maybe like 5 hours in the base game, if
So
that.
what modded? That's something we haven't even touched on is how these games have been modded. I mean, Crusader Kings was modded to completely change it to become a Song of Ice and Fire, a Game of Thrones simulator. We didn't even touch upon that. So, what mod are you playing for Hearts of Iron 4 that you're really loving so much?
That's true. One is called Kaiserreich. It's about what if Germany won World War I and takes place in 1936, the completely remade world. And you can play as the German Empire or socialist Britain and France or Canada and the former French government in exile or the Qing Empire in China and lead your nation to victory through a, a very strong narrative, or Russia, or a second American Civil War. It's the possibilities are as limitless as the sky, but it's the narrative, it's the storytelling, it's the characters, as much as it is the gameplay. The second mod is called TNO, the New Order. It's about what if Germany won World War II and it's set in the 60s. And it plays like a visual novel. The gameplay is a secondary element to the story that it's telling you in this hellish totalitarian world that is irrevocably broken.
So, this might come back to the discussion that we had about Baldur's Gate 3 a few weeks ago or months ago now. But so for me, I can understand a base paradox experience where the story is made up as you're playing, and that's something we should be talking about at some point. But for you, it sounds more like these mods are they put you on a path. They have a story to tell you. But you've also said for Kaiserreich that the possibilities are as limitless as the sky. And for TNO, you said it's like a visual novel, but you played hundreds of hours into it. Visual novels often can play, the same story. Like I've only played Doki Doki Literature Club once, and that's more than enough for me. So, what? How is it about these stories that you're finding can be different each time? How are the possibilities limitless when they're also railroading you?
Yeah, it's a really good example. So, for one, play the German Empire. And do you want to have it go democratic, be a bastion of democracy against totalitarian, essentially, hardline communists to the west, and essentially fascism in Russia to the east? Do you want to go a military dictatorship? Do you want to play it as a kind of Bismarckian utopia of the reactionary, Prussian Junkers in control of the government, and that's just one nation? Do you want to play a Russian Republic or a Russian Empire or a Hitler analog in Russia? Say China. You want to reunite China as the rightful monarchy, or maybe as the socialist Kuomintang, or maybe people who see America as a model, a federal republic, and so on and so on. Just endless permutations for that. And it's different stories, all sorts of dozens of different stories, but I also do play the same story on repeat because I don't like being the bad guys.
So, in a case like this, it sounds like okay, you take control of a nation, and then you pick a path you want to go down, and then is the story radically different if you decide to go with, say, the Kuomintang versus the CCP?
Well, the Kuomintang is this essentially the CCP because the Kuomintang. So Chiang Kai-shek never came to permanent power in this timeline, and so he never was able to really purge the Kuomintang of the left-wing elements as he did in the late 20s. He came to power here, but died in the failed Northern expedition. So it retained the radical nationalist band that it quickly lost in our history.
Okay,
Entry over.
okay, but I guess that sounds cool. I guess what I'm asking is how radically different are the stories based off of the decisions that you make?
Oh, they're very different. Say just just this one faction of Chinese socialists. Do you want to be more anarchist, libertarian anarchist, more workers and peasants, more urban proletarian? You want to be, say, like a Bonapartist type system? You want to compromise with the remnants of the liberals in Hawaii? Do you want to have, something that makes 1984 look cuddly and freedom?
Okay. I mean, I gotta say, I have never been interested in Hearts of Iron 4 before. You're making me kind of interested. This is maybe you haven't tried, but have you tried playing it on Steam Deck? Does it work well on it?
I have not, but it runs on my decrepit old laptop, so
Okay, I mean that's really more what I mean because with the Steam Deck, so pulling the curtain back, I don't know if I ever mentioned this on the podcast. Maybe I have. My gaming PC does not work anymore. I murdered it during open heart surgery. I tried to uh, fix some slowdown by replacing thermal paste because that was the problem last time. Was not the problem this time. And now I can't even boot into Windows. I'm getting blue screens of death. I think it has to do with a power cable that I accidentally let gravity destroy when my case. Anyway, I fucked up. So now, in terms of PC gaming, because I'm staring imminent unemployment in the face, I don't think that it is responsible for me to get a gaming PC at this time. So my PC gaming has been my Steam Deck. Last night, actually, I bought CK3 on Steam. I've been playing it on Game Pass, which worked well on my gaming PC, but doesn't work on the Steam Deck. So I figured I would just buy it. And the game crashed an hour in, and so I just, I refunded it. Had a good time, but if it's not going to run, like physically run, then I'm not going to have it. And I've heard that EU4 runs well on the Steam Deck. I haven't tried it yet. I might even own Hearts of Iron 4 now that I think about it. And I don't even know why. With Steam, you never quite know, but maybe I'll give it a shot on the deck if I do. Let me see. I do. I do own Hearts of Iron 4. Couldn't tell you why, but I might have to give that a shot. So you have brought up the distinction between well, we've referred to it, but there's a distinction between like linear storytelling and emergent storytelling. And when we finally got through all of our hubbubaloo and got to tell us about your experience playing the game, you started off with a game experience that was not emergent storytelling. So you started off with something that is explicitly not emergent storytelling. So you've played a lot of CK2, a lot of Crusader Kings. Tell us about what it's like to uh, play through this game in an emergent way, creating your own stories in the medieval world. What does that actually look like for a strategy game?
so emergent storytelling. What's the plot of CK2, Colin?
There isn't one.
So how do you have fun with it if there's no plot? There's no story.
Incest.
What?
I mean, you've seen the memes of Crusader Kings as an incest simulator,
I have. But on a serious note, how do you have fun if there's no story? Does the
right? I mean,
game
for Crusader Kings, it's about like making your own story.
so is that lazy then? Like how you bought a game, don't you expect a story? Why should you be expected to build your own story? Isn't that what the game does? Isn't there an implicit contract between the player and the developer? They provide a story that you interact with?
No, I mean, I don't think that's always the case. I mean, for one, let's just have something very basic. What is the story of Tetris? There is no story of Tetris, and yet people still play that game to this day.
Yeah. So what is it that you get with the game then? If it's not a story, then
Okay, I asked you to tell us about your experience playing it, and now you're doing question and answer like Barry Strauss did during my defense.
well, I was trying to get it's the experience more than the story, the experiential nature. That is what you get with the game. And games like Crusader Kings 2 with emergent storytelling, it's up to the player to provide the story. through, interaction with the game. It's a collaborative process. You are experiencing the game. You are not experiencing the story. You are making the story. You are helping to make the story.
So, can you share with us um, an example of that through your own experience? Is there anything that like stood out?
Yeah, and maybe I am the exception. Maybe I'm the outlier, an overactive imagination, get way too into things, as I think we've seen that to be the case in my playtimes. I often like, playing as a family, what would the choices do in this instant? I don't try to quote min-max end quote of always expand, always go for the most rational, the most optimal. What
Mhm.
would my high intrigue character or my, dumb but pious one do in this situation? So it's
Okay.
not going to be, a eugenics breeding ground.
So, to clarify for the listeners, in Crusader Kings, every single character in the game, every single one, has a number of attributes and traits. And so, what Kevin is saying is that you can play disregarding those attributes, traits, which would still impact things on a gameplay level, but might not impact your decision as the player. Or you can put yourself into the shoes of your character and decide the decisions that the character would make, not one that you would make as a, say, benevolent god or something like that.
No, I go for the role playing aspects. My favorite type of game, you know, to play.
And that does explain why every time we play a JRPG, you tell me, well, where's the role playing? And I have to smack you down and say that's not what role playing means. But tell us a time that like this role playing like really made the game special to you.
So I was playing the Laskaria dynasty in Western Anatolia after 1204, after the Fourth Crusade upended the Roman Empire in the east and sent the successor states to Anatolia, to what's now northeastern Turkey, to what's now Albania. So Theodore Lascaris, the emperor in exile of the Byzantines, of the Romans. And so I played, by trying to make, truces, treaties with the Turks to the east, none with the Venetians, none with the Franks, with the Western Europeans, hell bent on reconquering the departed, lost homeland, biding time, not, going for a war that, if I lose, would leave me at the mercy of others, for years, possibly even decades, not intermarrying with Catholic powers. Because I felt that's what also that's what really did happen of, let the East take care of it, let the Turks take care of themselves, concentrate on Greece, on the Franks, on the Latins.
And how did that work for you?
I am not as good a general and strategist as the real life Lascarids, so I had to restart.
Actually, I want to talk to you about restarting at some point, because some I do find myself rage quitting a lot. But I totally feel what you're saying. In terms of the role playing aspect. I had a Crusader Kings campaign where I decided that my character hated the Holy Roman Emperor, even though I was a vassal of the Holy Roman Emperor, and it would have been really good for me to like curry favor with him. Instead, I kidnapped him, and the rest of the Holy Roman Empire did not know that he was in my dungeons. So I tortured him for fun. And that's how I like to play Crusader Kings.
Okay,
Let's talk about
now I
I want to
realize
talk
the bullet
about
I dodged.
another fantasy fulfillment, because something that I think Paradox games really let us do is not just say, okay, like can we recreate historical scenarios, but also see, all right, can we try to counteract history? Can we try to do something else? Something that I really end up doing all the time when I play EU4 is I play in Ireland. My heritage is German and Irish, but I identify more with the Irish side. And so I normally pick like Leinster or maybe one of the southern kingdoms or Connacht. I'm not sure how you pronounce Irish, especially at that point. But I really like to like unify the island and then take it to the British, and fight back. I like to colonize America if possible. I will. It's funny, Kevin. I'm not that strong of a Catholic, but what I definitely am not is a Protestant. And so if I'm ever playing a Catholic country in EU4, it does not matter what country it is. If I'm playing in the Holy Roman Empire as a state that would become a Protestant state, I don't. I go counter Reformation the entire time. Ireland stays Catholic. We stop the Reformation in England. One of my favorite moments was taking over the entirety of the the western part of Western Europe by no casus belli declaring war on Spain and then just slowly conquering the entire Iberian Peninsula as well as like the British Isles to then take off and found an Irish America. And then we stood as a bulwark against the evils of Protestantism.
I don't know how to respond to that.
I mean, don't you agree that Protestants are the devil?
I think you bring up a really good point how these kind of historical games allow a fantasy. We can set right what we imagine are the wrongs
Yeah,
done to the groups that we identify with, whether through descent, through religion, through academic or personal interest in the past.
totally. I mean, one of the things that I think is really cool about um, CK and about EU is that there are you can create nations that did not exist at that time based off of historical traditions. I mean, one of the classic ones is revitalizing the Roman Empire. I mean, Kevin had referred to uh, the Byzantine Empire as the Roman Empire in the East, which is certainly true. But in both of these cases, if you like conquer the Mediterranean world, you can refound the Roman Empire, and then it'll come with like Roman religious traditions and a whole new mechanics of how to run an empire of that size. I've never actually done it myself, but I do think it's really cool that it exists if somebody wants to take on that challenge. Kevin, one thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because one of the problems of emergent storytelling is that it does require the active buy-in by the player, which in some cases works, in some cases doesn't. For instance, I don't get a lot of fun playing games like Minecraft, where I have to build my own fun. I have no interest in building stuff or anything like that. Not everybody agrees. I was teaching about Augustus today. I asked students, why did Augustus want to do a big building project? And one of my students says, when I'm playing Minecraft, I just want to build. Augustus is the same way, which was not an acceptable answer in my class. But he was pointing towards that he has this urge. I don't particularly have that urge. I have an urge to play EU4 for different reasons, play CK3 for different reasons. But one of the struggles that I find is that I could be playing well, things are going great, and then I get a setback. And then I get so discouraged by the setback that instead of playing out the game, I just quit. Do you experience that as well, or are you tougher enough to like go through and deal with the fallout?
No, I definitely see that, quitting and frustration is definitely something that happens. And I think it's really compounded by the lack of an end. There's a beginning of the game, there's no set end. And so if what you do is, as what most people do with these games, you play until you're not having fun anymore, a big shock, makes you realize this was not fun. I'm gonna go restart or do something different that will be fun. Where I say, Kaseki, if you lose a boss fight, you're not going to restore it. There's a definite end point to Zero, to Azure, to Cold Steel, whatever.
Yeah.
Does
And
that
you
make
also
sense?
know something else that I think is important is that for a game like that, like Azure or Zero, you know that the challenge in front of you is beatable. One of the reasons why I often quit a Florence game, maybe I've united Italy, gone into Africa a little bit, maybe southern France, is that this entire time the Ottomans have been blobbing, have been expanding. And if you don't handle the Ottoman threat early enough, they will expand into Europe and attack you. And whenever that happens, I mean, I just don't know how to beat them because they're way too strong. And then I'm looking at that and I'm like, okay, well, the only way for me to deal with this is to give up the war and then they take some of my stuff. That's fine. But then where do I go from here? They can't attack France, can't really attack like Austria. Definitely can't attack the Ottomans. So feel like I get stuck and then I just say, all right, well, that was the end of the game for me. Even though what I should be doing is playing on learning from my mistakes, trying to see if I can find a way to beat back the Ottomans. Also, something that we haven't talked about, one of the coolest things about these games is that the game acts as if everybody else is playing just like you. And by that, I mean, so like if I'm playing as a nation in EU4 and I'm given decisions to make, I have to go and make those decisions and it impacts my nation. But all of the other nations on the map are playing by the same rules, including the fact that they will get random decisions and then they will, or random events, and they'll make their own decisions, which will impact how things go. They have their own goals, but unexpected things can happen to them too. And if I was a good enough player, I would realize that. I would be patient. I would say, let's see how these things go. And some of the best moments playing Crusader Kings, playing EU4, has come from me being that kind of patient. And yet I find myself very rarely having that wherewithal.
No, get good.
Yeah, I guess I should play for like thousands of hours so I can just conquer everything.
And now that feels like it's not something that's 100% admiring. So,
What, in your opinion, Kevin, is there a superior form of storytelling discussing here? Like, is emergent better than linear storytelling? So you're shaking your head no. How come?
well, linear. Well, I don't want to linear, not in the sense that there's only one correct narrative. Like, I like it when games give me a set narrative to engage with or set narratives to engage with. Because I think a team of writers working together for, weeks, months, years can do a better job than a guy a couple hours at a time.
Yeah,
And it feels incomplete an RPG or an RPG like game without a narrative they want me to experience in a certain way. Maybe not a certain order, but in a certain manner,
yeah.
broadly defined, to have it be more of a complete, holistic, well-rounded experience. But some people aren't like that. It's the personal challenge, the personal satisfaction. I think more people are like that than me. Look at why Minecraft is so popular and other games like it.
Yeah. I do think there is something to be said for the emergent storytelling perspective in how it can engage the player in a more engrossing fashion. And by that I mean going into these kids playing Minecraft, they go in there and they're like, okay, I'm in the game. I'm setting these goals. I'm going to do these things. I need to make sure that I survive the night by myself building a shelter. Stuff like that. It's them in the game and them experiencing the game, as we've brought up. But same thing with Paradox games, where you're playing a nation or you're playing a character and the plot is what's happening to you and how you do stuff. And in moment to moment, I don't think it's superior to linear storytelling, but I will say that the way that I engage with it is a lot different. When I'm playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, for instance, or I'm playing Trails, or I'm playing Yakuza, there's like gameplay moment, do the gameplay moment. Then I see what the plot is next, right? I want to see what happens next. I'm a viewer, I'm a reader. I'm not a character in it. I am not putting myself 100% in those shoes, especially as I've been maturing and trying to approach game stories from a more analytical angle. A game like CK3 or EU4, you are in the game. Like you yourself must be reacting to what's happening, and you're setting your own goals, and things are about you. And if you're able to be patient enough to let that happen, I do think that's a really intense storytelling experience. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of people love the Paradox series, even if they're not huge history nerds like us. It's not just playing a historical character or historical nation, it's being in that time and place in a way that other media literally cannot capture. I think you could tell the same story in Trails by reading a book a lot of the time. I don't know if gameplay really plays that much of a role in it, but I don't think that you can um, summarize or have the same experience that you can have with a Paradox game by reading a book or watching a movie. Like that has to be because of the gameplay, of the active element.
I agree completely. We've read some really interesting Trails narratives in the print format that were good and they felt true. They felt true to the Kaseki ethos.
Do you think that there's any way? I mean, and I already know that they don't, but could you conceive of a means by which the Trail series or JRPG games can adapt elements of the emergent storytelling perspective, or is this more of a it's either emergent or it's linear?
I don't think it's quite so clear a binary, but I don't see how they could, given how tight, I don't want to say tightly plotted, but intricate everything is.
Yeah.
And I hope they don't try to do anything emergent. I think there's too much freedom in some aspects. Like Joshua and Estelle is the canon romance. There should be canon Vale Road for Lord and Ellie. Rain and Elisa seems to be the one game I played.
Nah, man, it's Reen and
I
Sarah.
don't
Definitely Reen and Sarah.
that's it. I don't like the power imbalance. The choose your own harem allows you to choose everything that means nothing.
Yeah, because they can't build off of anything if it's all about player choice. Because they can't predict what you've done in the next games.
Exactly. There's no lasting consequences built on a castle of sand.
Now, speaking of castles of sand, my friend, we have talked about Paradox games for a good hour and 10 minutes. Some of this will be edited out on account of saying things we shouldn't say. But do you have any lasting thoughts that you want to leave our listeners with before we close out?
No, nothing comes to mind. On next episode will be chapter one of Trails into Crossbell. No, fuck.
Trails
On
into
next
Azure.
episode, on next episode will be chapter one of Trails into Azure, released on a Friday. Perfect start to the weekend, and I personally cannot wait to get into the meat of the chapter. Not just the prologue, really get the SSS back, the new members. I'll be looking forward to when your schedule lightens up.
Yes, I mean the real yes, I've been playing Final Fantasy, but also I'm traveling for spring break to visit a friend of mine, just like as you were traveling. Actually, where did you travel to last week?
I traveled to Canton for the Football Hall of Fame and then to Pittsburgh.
I'm also going to Pittsburgh.
Sorry.
I mean, I feel like you should have just waited a week. That when we could have met up, but it's not like you knew about it. In fact, I now realize I don't think I've ever told you that I'm going to Pittsburgh next week. Well, anyway, that's why we're not releasing an episode next week, but we will release one the week after. I can almost certainly promise you that.
Next time, I'm Kevin. That's Colin.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye bye.